Hello, everyone, and welcome to another CSA webinar in 2026. So we are really thrilled to have over 115 registrations for today's webinar. And actually, people come from a variety of industries and countries. So we have people from 20 countries joining today. And I think this is a clear signal of how important today's topic is, but also it is a testament to the reputation of our two speakers. So I'm joining this webinar today from cloudy and rainy Cologne, but who cares? This is a webinar, and hopefully you're sitting in a more sunny space, such as California. So my name is Julia Janssen-Holdig, and I'm leading the Certified Senders Alliance. And the CSA is a service of ECO, Association of the Internet Industry, in collaboration with the German Dialog Marketing Association. Let me give you just a little bit of background about the CSA. So for 20 years, we certify commercial bulk email senders who comply with email best practices and security standards. And in return, they gain trust from customers, mailbox providers, and security providers, and also valuable data, which helps them protect their platform and enhance sender reputation. So we have a brand new product sheet, and you find it in our download section if you want to get more information about the CSA. And I would like also to take a moment to thank our supporters in 2026. DMARC Advisor, Demartion, Halon, NameShield, and Spamhaus. And without those companies, we could not act in the way we do right now. They support our mission, and yeah, we can do much stuff because of their support. If you want to get more information about those companies, please also visit the download section. A little bit on housekeeping. So you are muted by default during the whole webinar. And also, please don't raise your hands, as I will not react on that. But you may raise your questions all time during the webinar via the chat box. I'm going to read them out once, or if the time allows so. Yes. And now I'll hand over to our rockstar speakers of today. I am so happy to welcome Lauren Meyer. Lauren is the founder of Send It Right, where she helps teams make sense of how email actually works, from strategy and infrastructure to real-world performance. With nearly 2 decades in the email ecosystem, she's worked across multiple angles as an operator, executive educator, and industry convener, and is known for translating complex topics into clear, practical guidance for senders. And she may soon also be known as a competitive sailor, having just joined a racing team. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi,
And
thanks. It's so great to be here.
joining her is Melinda Plemmel, Senior Consultancy Specialist at Spamhaus. Melinda is a seasoned professional with over 20 years of experience in the email industry, spanning technical account management, deliverability consulting, and ISP relationship management. She's a recognized industry leader in filtering technologies across major ISPs in North America, Brazil, and Australia, with deep expertise in email deliverability, blacklist management, and anti-spam intelligence. And when she's not deep in her work, she's out on the ice. She recently joined a curling team. So sportive today. But now, ladies, I'm
Thank
going to get out of your way, and the stage is yours.
thank you.
All right. Ready to do this, Mel?
Hey, I'm here, girl. Let's do it.
Thanks. All right. Well, let's get into it then. All right. So I guess if you're here with us today, there's a good chance that you're one of the people who gets pulled in after something breaks. You're probably working with senders who think that they're doing everything right, right? They're following best practices. Their authentication is super solid. We've, been seeing them sending without issues. until suddenly they're on a block list, and perhaps even one at Spam House, no less, which is terrifying for everyone sitting in this room. And I think that the trick is that we're now expected to not only just explain it, but fix it super fast, right? Melinda and I both see this all the time, just from different sides of the fence, right? I'm from the sender's perspective, she's from the blocklist perspective. So what we want to do today is really dig into that gap between what, doing everything right and still ending up with a problem. And so, Mel, I'm curious, how often do you hear the phrase, we haven't changed anything?
Um, Honestly, probably daily, maybe multiple times a day. Um, in fact, I was recently just at a conference, I mean, the same one that you were at as well, Lauren, and I have people coming up to me all the time asking me about, we're on these block lists, we're not sure what's going on. We've had this true system for the last X years. We can't figure out why now suddenly we're on these block lists. And I'm always of the opinion it's like the world changes around you, and if you don't change with it, you're going to get caught. And so that's really what's happening a lot of times is when you're finding yourself on a block list is the world is changing, technologies are changing, rules are changing, because spam becomes much more sophisticated over time. And so unfortunately, if you're not adjusting to that, there is that possibility that you get caught. It's never just suddenly, it's something that builds up over time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's funny because, like, from the sender side, it feels like the rules are pretty well understood at this point. Like, thank you, Google and Yahoo, for making those super clear. We all know that authentication is super important, that permission is really, one of the paramount aspects of deliverability, compliance with those requirements that are out there. But I think at the same time, with things getting so much more complex, right? We've got like more systems, we got AI, we've got more data, more shared infrastructure, which I think is something that we've kind of seen the pendulum kind of swing a bit. So I guess from your side, what do you see that's actually changed the most?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. This industry has matured in such a great way. I mean, folks that are working, deliverability and, compliance, they get like the basics. They get like the authentication. They understand the laws that have been created over time to really help, with privacy and stuff. They understand a lot about like permission based, acquisitions and list building. But also over time we've seen a lot of companies. I know when I first started in this industry, some of the ESPs that existed then no longer exist, or they've been gobbled up by bigger companies, and they've become more and more consolidated. So that makes it a lot more difficult, especially when you're not focusing on some of the compliance that was in one side may not necessarily match with what the compliance is on the new company that you're in. You can get things like old sending practices kind of get inherited, every once in a while. Old lists come along with that. And there's just different standards that just get mashed together. So it makes it a lot harder for lists and block lists.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah, and I feel like it's there's kind of also this like normalization of like what's working, right? Like we've got all these like cold email, like it's literally like an industry at this point, and it's an industry that's doing well, and they're very bold because they're like, well, if Google wanted to stop it, they would stop it, and they don't seem to stop it, right? So I think we're still seeing people trying to find like loopholes within platforms,
Mm-hmm.
which is just kind of frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, that is truly the whole cold email industry. And, over time, from a receiver's perspective, we really do try to look for the malicious spam. Um, about it's such a small percentage of what we see from ESPs. So when we're developing rules and we're looking at things, we're developing them and making them to really catch what's truly dangerous out there. But unfortunately, some platforms do allow for a lot of folks to get on for free. They're able to sort of take advantage of these platforms, and it becomes really, really difficult because they just slide just right under that line. And when you find them, they bounce around from IP to IP, they bounce around from domain to domain, and it's hard to block a platform like, or list a platform like a Gmail, because that can impact so many really legitimate and good senders. But they are making it normal to like do, lead scraping. They have inbox rotations. They utilize like domain warming services. So they just fall right under that radar, and it makes it really difficult, but it does cause a lot of problem when we're seeing a lot of that bubble up in the industry.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like this is something I've seen on like every ESP that I've worked for, where like the good spammers are actually very good at staying under the radar. Like I actually, my first job in email was with an affiliate marketing company. And when I left there, I met up with somebody afterwards, and he literally said, like, well, we found that when we dumb down the content, when we include a couple of typos, that actually really helps. But what they also do is they suppress all of what they call like their hyper complainers, which also is the people who have like the most amount of engagement, because they
Hmm.
know that if you're engaging a lot, you're also more likely to mark something as spam. So like when you're working for an ESP, it's really hard to find those bad guys because they are doing everything right, right? Like they have all these processes in place that make it just fly under the radar, exactly as you said. Like they stay compliant, but
Yes.
just barely.
Just enough, and they have like a complete like support group. Like, I mean, there's subreddits around how to do this type of mailing and how to get past filters. I mean, there isn't, like you said, there is a complete industry, and in a lot of part of the world, these are considered to be very legit jobs. I mean, this is something that they are utilizing to, provide for their family. And so it's a difficult situation, and it comes down to understanding why this is problematic, and that's a much taller task to take in hand, is reaching out to folks and educating them on how this is problematic. But it's hard to do when there's not a lot of consequences behind it as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess I mean that's one thing that I think I love about working with Spam House. Like I hate to say it, but I think the audience here probably will understand this. That like sometimes it's good when somebody gets listed by Spam House, because that way it's like we can have that productive conversation with that sender to say, no, for real, this is a problem. Like you need to change this, and here's my proof, right? So yeah, so thank you for your service. I think it's
Oh.
incredibly important.
Well, you're welcome. And it's funny because when I actually was on, the other side, the sender side, I mean, most of my career was on that side. There were moments that I was honestly praying for that Spam House listing, because I knew that would help me move that needle to actually make some changes necessary to stop the problem from the reason why we got listed. So I absolutely get that.
Yeah, right.
So
You're falling out of your chair either way. Like you're shaking in your boots, or you're just like, oh, thank you, finally. Like I can kill them. Yeah, get them up there. So nice. Okay.
absolutely.
All right. So I know in our prep session we were talking a little bit about, and I think this is part of it where, all these senders that we tend to work with ESPs, they are legitimate brands. They're legitimate senders. They really feel like they're checking all the boxes. They are doing everything right. But I think that's where there are a lot of things that are kind of outside of their control, but they do impact their reputation. So what are some of those things that you've seen in the field?
I mean, we're seeing a lot more consolidation. We see that, that there's a focus, and we seem to get into the weeds sometimes, you know what I mean? And I'm always like, look at the bigger picture. We see everything that's coming through our systems and stuff. And when you're utilizing, I mean, you always want to make sure that you're identifying your senders correctly. You want to make sure that they can control as much as their reputation as possible. However, that's not the case anymore. I mean, things have changed. I there's a lot more pooling that's going on, so it becomes a lot more difficult to find the culprit in bigger pools. There's systems that can rotate rather quickly, so that makes it problematic and stuff. But anything that you can do to really, really try to maintain or control or isolate a reputation to a sender is going to be in your best interest at the end of the day. If that means making subdomains, if that means, you know what I mean, just anything like that, that's going to be helpful for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like there's just so many ways that the mailbox providers are tracking us and that blocklist providers are tracking us that we're kind of, not to say we're not aware of, but it's a different view, right? Like they're looking into the same house, but through different windows or doors, right? And so I think
Yeah.
it's challenging sometimes, but that's where I think, yeah, the more you can kind of separate yourself from others is super helpful in that case. Um, And I think, okay, so like I kind of want to move into the next part so we can stay on track, guys. You got to keep us honest on this so we keep moving. But I think, before we get into like the stuff that's not visible, that is hard for us to see on the sender side, what is the stuff that you see that's like blindsiding people, right? Because I think this is where that confusion really starts to come from, where people are getting it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot more sort of proxy sort of issues happening, like residential proxies. We've been seeing a lot of spam that comes through those types of systems, like the Internet of Things and different things like that. We recently honestly had an ISP reach out to us because some of their ESP clients were starting to experience some blocks, and what we were finding out is that they allow proxy networks. They allow, they also host these types of networks on their systems. Well, these, after all these years, everybody's information is out there. We know, like, with all these huge security breaches that have happened over the last like several years, information's out there. So we will see, for example, when like an IP or something is really trying to check credentials. They're just bombing mailboxes looking to see what's accepted, and they're going through these, the ports, like port 587, for example. And they think they call it like credential stuffing, right? Where they literally are just trying to take all of this data that they've acquired somehow and see what works and what goes through the system. So we see a lot of that happening. We see a lot more account takeovers because of the same reasoning. Everybody's credentials have been leaked online. And so the bad guys are going to take advantage of that and really try to um, look for the mailboxes that are a little more unsecure, and they can use those to send out spam. Email forwarding services are problematic. Um, those come from sometimes very, very legit platforms, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of filtering or outbound filtering on some of those MTAs. So just garbage can come out of it, and that can create havoc for an infrastructure. And that, not only does that damage the reputation of an IP or a domain, but it also damages the reputation of that platform because if they're allowing this spam to come through their system. So just a couple of things, that we're seeing an increase at for sure.
Yeah.
Ladies, I have a few questions, and
Oh,
I'm
okay.
going to throw not all of them because there are really some coming in. As you mentioned, it is good that senders sometimes are listed to have that conversation. Oh, yeah, it's going back to the start. Being listed for less than a day, does that indicate a possible false positive? And is this correct by a human or system?
Um, Not necessarily is that a false positive. You're listed absolutely for a reason. And it's a warning, right? It's a signal to you to say something went wrong. And from Spam House's perspective, it's not just one thing that ends you up on one of our lists. It's a series of things that end you up on the list. And so even if you're listed for a day, like I said, our goal is to continually make the internet a safer place. And we are really, really focused on truly what's malicious in the world. Unfortunately, as those spammers become much more sophisticated, we do have to continually monitor and update our systems to catch newer threats all the time. And if there's just one more rule that's added, there is that possibility that can catch folks if they're doing something that might be a little questionable. So being listed for a day, I would not consider to be a false positive, but I would consider to be a warning that you need to take a little deeper look into your infrastructure to make sure that what you're doing truly is following all best practices and going above and beyond in a lot of ways.
Makes sense. And there's another one. There's so much conflicting advice on LinkedIn and forums about warming up IPs and domains. Which sources are actually vetted by the people who manage the block lists? That's a good one.
It, I'm happy to take this, Lauren. I think you should as well, like, chime into this because I feel like, there are a lot of experts on LinkedIn. Um, and they all are giving a lot of advice. Um, but there's a huge industry out here, and this industry has matured over many, many years. And there's a lot of folks that have very deep understanding of this industry. And I personally feel, you can certainly look at what's being posted on LinkedIn, but do a check on that. Kind of go to the blogs that are known in the world, like CSA, for example, Spam House, Lawrence. There's other folks out there that have been in this industry for ages, and they literally have helped write the book on this. And so those are the sources that I would say lean into heavier as opposed to what's on LinkedIn. And go to conferences. That's really this. We go back to how this industry has matured. One of the things that has changed is, ISPs and Blocklists have become more connected to that sender community. And those are the folks that you really want to listen to, and those are the events that you want to take advantage of, so you can really truly understand the truth behind what to do with warming up and different things like that, because there's a science to that. It's not just something you can do. A service just can't make that happen for you, but there's a whole science behind it, and I think that's
Right. Check the
needs to be
sources,
looked at.
right? Make sure the
Yeah.
sources are trusted. Okay, I'll leave you alone for now.
And I
Okay,
don't know,
nice.
Laura, do you have anything to add to that? Because you've worked on this for years as well. I mean, you
Yeah,
understand
yeah.
what
I mean,
it's
I
like to
think this
warm
is
up properly.
for sure. Yeah, I feel like when you find a source that you can trust, I think that's almost like where you can go from ground zero and kind of build out. So, like for example, Al Iverson in our space, right? He has the spam resource blog, amazing, really helpful. Laura and Steve Atkins from Word to the Wise, right? That's another one that not to say that you're going to agree with everything that's ever come out of their mouths or through their fingertips, but I think it's these are people that do know their stuff, that they work with a lot of senders, they see a lot of data, and they really pay attention to the news and they fact check everything. So if you kind of, not to say that they get the stamp of approval, but if you see a LinkedIn post and you see those folks that are engaging, that's likely much more valuable information. Whereas if you just kind of see a bunch of folks that you haven't ever, kind of heard of before, or they're in the comments just being like, yeah, thanks for the information. Like they're learning, they're not the ones that you kind of should be following. So I think it's just,
Yeah.
sort of pay attention to what's happening around the information that you get and who's supporting that and who's perhaps out there trying to refute it. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I think email Slack is also another good place to go because same people are in there helping out. Like if you go especially into the deliverability channel, if you're not in Email Geek Slack, go sign up right now. You just have to kind of apply. But we've got like Marcel Becker from Yahoo in there answering questions. We've got just a bunch of really talented people who do know their stuff and literally are speaking on behalf of mailbox providers in some
Yep.
cases. Yeah.
Yep. The OGs, absolutely.
Yeah, that's it, right? All right. Well, let's I think the problem with a lot of this stuff, right? Like you mentioned a couple of kind of like issues that are happening now that perhaps people that are joining like either aren't aware of or they're aware of but they don't realize the impact, or they're kind of like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I feel like a lot of times we're behind the eight ball, right? Like we are already reacting to something because there's something in the data or they've been listed or something like that. So even if you understand all this stuff, we don't actually get to see what's happening. So like I think this is the part where even when you're really experienced, your team is going to get tripped up because you're conscientious, you're dedicated folks, you're here, you're joining webinars, you think you're monitoring things super closely. But I guess, Mel, from your perspective, like are we senders monitoring the right things? Are there things we're not monitoring that we should be?
I think definitely. I mean, you talk about like best practices, and there's definitely signals that I think we can that are being utilized, right, to monitor what we think is the right thing. I mean, we have the classic, signals, and of course, you've got your open rates, your click rates, bounce rates, complaint rates, et cetera, et cetera. They have absolutely changed over time, so the value to them has definitely shifted. I've always been a believer that any data point is a good data point, regardless. I mean, but for example, like open rates, we have seen that completely change over the last several years because of MPP. So it doesn't necessarily, before it might have been a signal that measured intent. Now it just measures sort of activity, right? So that has shifted, and you have to think about that differently, that's not a signal that's going to give you the reason why. um I think click rates are still valuable, but that's also narrowing in far as the value as well. It only captures, a small subset of like engaged users. It doesn't capture like the full picture. It just gives you like a little snippet of stuff. Um, the complaint rates, are still very valuable. But once again, that's only going to show you folks that are somewhat active and taking some type of action, and the action is, is a complaint, which is not what we want and stuff. But that's still some interest because it's a silent dissatisfaction. It just shows that somebody isn't satisfied with what you're sending. Unsubscribe rate, which could be looked at as a negative, I see it as more of a positive because unsubscribing is a much better action than complaining. So that is something definitely to continue to take into consideration. And of course, I think spam traps are extremely important. It can be treated like like sort of a real-time signal or failure signal, but I think in reality it's it's a signal that shows you like over time something data quality has sort of slipped over time. You know what I mean? It definitely looks at list accusation problems. It can help identify aging or recycled data. And, just like a shift in the long term, hygiene that you might be maintaining. And then, there are going to be other signals that, I think people take in consideration. And, depending on your platforms, depending on the client, I mean, you can look at things like conversion rates and, all that, but it's everything. You have to look at everything as a whole and never just isolate into one thing, because I think we are now in the time where block lists have become so much more sophisticated. They're, like I said, they're not looking at just one thing. They're looking at the overall thing. So in an example, if you are part of a company that just got recently acquired, what does that, compliance team look at? What's the resources that they have dedicated to those teams? That unfortunately is often overlooked because compliance centers are often considered to be cost centers as well. They're not directly bringing in net revenue. I can argue that fact. I feel like long term they definitely have a positive impact on revenue, because if they have a safe system and the infrastructure is smart and they're they are catching the bad guys and they're not letting folks onto the platform that shouldn't be on the platform, that helps build a reputation, and that's a positive thing. And overall, that hopefully will bring you more folks into the to be part of that platform. So I think those are definitely some good factors there.
Yeah, and I love that you kind of mentioned like almost like just to monitor it all. But I think this is one of those where, from the sender perspective, even just especially if you're working for an ESP, you tend to only have the information that's like within your walls, or that is like a third party data feed that you have, things like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's just like we are still, everybody's like opens are dead, clicks are just as bad, and that's true. But if those are two of 5 or 6 data points that you have to work with within your ESP, it's tough. Like you got to figure out where you go outside the house to actually get that information. And I think this is one of those, senders have been relying on seed testing for many years. And I think, this has, it's been a good proxy, if you will, for like measuring inbox placement rates over the years. But the problem is that mailbox providers don't give us that information, right? Well, aside from Comcast, shout out to Comcast, because now they've started giving inbox placement data. So way to go, Alex and team. But yeah, I think it's, the seed testing, I've always kind of been sort of like side-eyeing it a little bit, because I think the results are just not as accurate as people kind of treat them. Like people treat them like gospel, right? Like you hear people are like, my inbox rate is 98%. And I'm like, first of all, do you mean delivery rate or do you mean deliverability rate? Because they're different things. But where are you getting that data? Because I think mailbox providers have been saying for probably over a decade that they can tell very clearly the difference between like a seed testing address and one that's just chaotic as anything that's owned by a human, right? Like think about the way that you use your inbox. You open one message 55 times, you save one in your drafts, you forward it on to a friend, you whatever you're doing, right? You're doing things that just can't really be mimicked very well. So I think that's where, like, and you mentioned Apple MPP, that has really, I think, made seed testing even more volatile, because we've got those inflated opens, right? The real engagement is being masked, but we're still kind of trying to use that to sort of figure out where things go, right? So I think that's where, with seed testing, like use it as a grain of salt, use it as like a bucket full of salt, because I think it's really challenging to reflect that real user experience. Like perhaps it might even be more valid if you're just using it for like what a new user experiences from your
Mm-hmm.
list. But as soon as somebody starts, engaging with your mail, if they've been receiving it for a while, the seeds just aren't going to interact the same way that you are. So I think it's tricky, right?
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on that. I mean, C testing certainly does have a place. I think it helps measure maybe the platform more than the way
Hmm.
the human's going to interact. Like, we humans are complex. Let's just say what we love today, we may hate tomorrow, and then we'll love it again the next day. I mean, that's just how we are as human beings. And I think, when it comes to mailbox providers, that is extremely difficult to measure. And so they spend so much time and resources really trying to understand, those signals, because, that's a clear signal to them. It's like, how are individuals engaging with this? And sees, like, to your point, they simply don't show that. They will show like, this has been delivered, it's been accepted, and it possibly has been placed in one of these folders, right? And so
Yeah,
it's
for
not a true
sure.
indicator. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny. At the Deliverability Summit last week, David from Cesnam was, he had a presentation that was talking about all the different signals that they're looking at specifically, right? And I think it's, this isn't Gmail, this isn't Yahoo, this isn't Microsoft, but it's really, really detailed, right? Like they're getting into like not just, whether people are opening and clicking, but like what's the dwell time? How often are people actually like, are they reading that message? Are they moving it to fold? Like they can just see a lot more information. And, for us to just kind of, of course we're using proxy kind of metrics, but understand that they really are looking very, very closely at the type of interaction that's happening. I think that's something people kind of overlook or just don't want to don't want to acknowledge just yet.
Well, because it is complex, right? And then I always think like, well, how do I engage with mail? Like, I know I sign up for things. There's many things that I get that I do not sign up for, and I react very differently to that. But even what I sign up for, I mean, one day I may be really into that, and then I won't touch it for weeks. I mean, that's just, you have to think about like your own actions as a user of this, industry. And so those are the things, like, how often do I really engage with this, and why don't I when I don't? So those are the questions to look at. And I love that presentation was actually quite good too. I agree with
Yeah,
you.
really insightful. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that
it
one.
really was.
Um,
Hmm.
all right, so you touched upon spam traps, and I feel like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
one's really challenging for senders, right? The whole point is, and there was, in your session, you folks were talking about just how, your session last week, you were talking about how expensive it is and how much work it takes to kind of maintain those traps. So of course you're keeping them secret. Like we sometimes stumble upon them, but when by the time we're hitting traps, the problem has been there for a while. So I think that's where like that we haven't changed anything is a real problem. But like, what are, is this something that you're seeing at Spam House where like people are just kind of racking them up slowly over time? Like, is there like you mentioned, is it like a slow ramp up and then eventually kind of hit that threshold, or is it? Do you also see the volatility where all of a sudden they go from not really hitting traps to a ton of them?
Yes to all of that. I mean, it's a look. It's never just a one trap thing, right? Like, hitting one trap is not going to be enough to get you listed.
Yeah.
It will be a series of things that are happening over time. Traps are just an extremely clear signal that you have some data quality issues.
Mhm.
Um, we know, like, when we see traps, and especially like the way that a trap is probably developed, gives us a huge picture on what might have been happening along that way. And if you hit, typos, for example, um, anyone can get a typo in their email list. I think we've all experienced that. We know that there's a million ways that a typo can come into your system. When we see hitting a large amount of typos, it certainly is a clear signal that maybe you're not doing the list hygiene and the ongoing maintenance that you should be doing. Some typos are just so obvious, that you're like, how are you sending to this? Like, for example, when you think about Gmail, right? They have two domains. Like those are their domains. They don't have any other extensions to them. Those are it. So if you see something that looks like Gmail, but maybe isn't Gmail, and it could be resolving. I mean, there could be, definite, resolving to something, but question those, look at those a little bit closer. And maybe those are the ones that you start to go back and start applying all the other metrics to see, is this person actually engaged in any way, right? What other metrics do we have to tie back to that and look at that? Certain traps are designed in a way to really catch malicious stuff. They're never released into the world. They are created in a way. They may have been, sat on for years before, something all of a sudden pops up. And that could be an indicator like, hey, there was a data breach and there was something that got out in there. And now this information is being used like this, which it should never be. So, spam traps to us are the definitely the foundation of what we do. I mean, that to us is a very, very clear signal. However, and let me just put out there, everyone has spam traps. Pretty much can look up just about any. If you're sending mail, there is that possibility you're going to have something within our system. But that doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't mean you're bad at all. What we also look at are 100 different other factors that give us that sense of bad. And so if you're hitting traps, depending on the type of traps that you're hitting, and then other factors that come into play, that's when things can be listed. So it's something that could be building up over time. You could be just slowly growing over time. You bring on one new client or you make some type of change to your infrastructure, and then that's just enough to sort of, flip that switch a little bit and stuff. So,
Yeah.
And I have two questions for you,
okay.
ladies.
Nice.
What is one of the more frustrating parts of dealing with senders who are blocked?
The denial. I think it's always the denial
This is
that,
a false positive like this?
well, and it's funny because, like, I mean, we can talk about AI, but we certainly do see patterns of AI being used sometimes. And I think, there are those legitimate uses where maybe English may not be your first language and you're utilizing that to get the message across. And then there's those that, this is the same message we have seen 1,000 times. And so we know
All
that it's
right.
not good. And so it does become frustrating because the first few things that they always throw out is like, we're authenticated. We're totally fine. We do everything right. Our systems haven't changed over the year. And so that convincing, like, look, we're only listing you because you've honestly reached a threshold. You have done several things that are questionable, and we see that as problematic on our side. And so, like, the back and forth can kind of get a little frustrating. Most people, though, I think, like I said, the folks that are in the industry and have been in the industry for such a long time, when they see a listing, they're like, okay, we have checked everything, and we're still sort of coming up blank onto what might be happening. And they're seeking really just more guidance. And so those are much, I enjoy those a lot more when we're working with folks that are looking to unblock. But there's a lot of denial. I think that's the most frustrating thing.
Perfect. And then I have one for you, Lauren. How do you convince internal stakeholders, well, to invest in deliverability or abuse prevention before there's a visible problem? So that's probably not your internal, but advising or consulting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think this one's super challenging because it just, if you figure, we're all deep in the weeds. We understand the context behind, if you say like, oh, my inbox placement rate is this or my open rates are that, what that means within the context of email. Most of the people in your company don't understand that, and they also don't care to understand that. This is something I learned the really hard way when I was working, with sales, and sales is trying to bring in those deals that are mutually exclusive and wonderful and going to save the company. And then, deliverability and compliance has to crush their soul by saying they're not compliant. They're like a really bad spammer, right? And so I think when you understand better, like where sales is coming from and what drives their decisions and their motivations, you can have a more productive conversation. Like for example, in that case, instead of saying go chase the biggest deals that you can, enable them with a bit of like a mini compliance checklist, right? Like I know Desi and Boris from Omnisend mentioned this last week in their session of just we have this mini one. Actually, I think they're using AI for it, where the salesperson can go give it a sniff test themselves before they even start really engaging with that sender, and then they can come to compliance with a question, right? So I think it's just more setting that expectation of like, don't go chase these bad senders. They're a waste of your time. You're not going to get them through compliance. And so get them chasing the right things. And I think across all the different departments that you work with, just kind of sitting with somebody on that team and really understanding like what is their role with the company, what is that motivation. I think it really is, same with marketing, right? Like marketing is responsible for driving a whole bunch of leads for your company, and not just leads but qualified leads, right? And that's a really stressful thing for them. And so the amount of times I've talked to really good marketers who at some point break down and they're like, maybe we just need to purchase a list, and then we all cringe. But like if you work with them and give them ideas for how to not do that and really make them understand why that's so problematic and what that's going to do to those positive leads that they brought in, you're speaking their language, not yours.
Oh, that's so important. Take the other perspective, put yourself in the other shoes, right?
For sure. And bring
Okay.
data, right? As often as you have it, even if it's the tiniest little indication of like, when we did this, that was bad. And look, it hurt this other thing, right? I think it's prove to them that there's a problem, again, in a language that they speak to, not just in your opens and clicks and spam complaints.
That's the part of the topic, right? Don't think you're doing everything right. Check the
Right.
data, right? Okay.
Exactly.
I'm going to
Yeah.
leave you again.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, she's gone. I'll miss you, Julia.
She'll be back.
Yeah, right. Yeah, she'll be back. All right. So we've talked about a lot of different things here. We even got into some of, how we sort of get over like the lack of information or those kind of influencers that are kind of misleading people. But then I did want to call out as well, like there are some really helpful kind of like data-backed research studies that are out there. So always try to kind of find those, and then maybe even pop into Email Geeks and sort of take a look and be like, is this legit? Like, are people complaining about this report, or are they liking this report and agreeing with it and using it to be helpful? But one problem I think we've been seeing is just that some of that stuff is just disappearing from the internet, or it's being written, like rewritten by AI to try to kind of like optimize it for filters to the point of being incorrect, right? And so I think Laura Atkins is actually working on a bit of a project behind the scenes to sort of try to like bring all that stuff into like a repository and have it be vetted, right? Have it be a trusted, safe place for people can go. So if you are interested in kind of helping support that, I'm sure she could use some help, because I think it's probably a massive project. It's definitely not a one-person project, but I think in addition to kind of, finding that good information, like, are there some tools that you think people could kind of use to sort of, I don't know, just figure out how to deal with some of these issues that you mentioned previously?
I mean, like you said, I think these mailing lists are huge. They're so it's such a great community. That's kind of the one thing that I've always found about our industry is how helpful we want to be with each other. Because I really do believe we want to see all of us succeed, right? If you're coming to these conferences, you've obviously shown that you do care about being better, and and that community wants to support that. And so taking advantage of these like mailing lists are absolutely key to really start that sort of foundational understanding. Going to these different conferences, and every conference has a slightly different focus. Absolutely. The one we were just at, the deliverability conference, I find is it's such a great conference because one, it's intimate, it's small, so you really can take the time to visit with folks and connect with people, but also the content is very real. It's still really talking about the challenges that everybody continues to face, and really these folks have found solutions, and none of this is easy. And going back to the blogs and some of these trusted sources, and I totally understand what Laura is saying. Some of this information that has been, it's hitting the 20-25 year mark for some information is out there. Some of it definitely is probably a little outdated, absolutely, because the industry has changed over time, but there's still so much that's gives you a foundational understanding of what we're dealing with and how it has grown, and I think that's extremely helpful. But reach out to the community. That's going to be the biggest asset that anybody's going to have. And going back to the LinkedIn posts, like you said before, who's engaging with those posts? Are they people that you're sort of recognizing these names, or are they just just names. We don't even know, who they are and stuff. And so
Yeah.
that to me is going to be one of your biggest assets really in this industry, is just leaning heavily into this community because it's so supportive. It's so unique in so many ways.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And then I guess, I mean, so I think some of the leading issues that you're seeing that people maybe aren't aware of, the things that they don't know they're not doing right, like the account takeovers, right? Forwarding abuse,
Yeah.
people issues, like how can people kind of identify those sorts of threat vectors ahead of time?
Yeah, that's ahead of time. That's a good question.
Or not, maybe after the
Usually,
fact. How can
well,
they
I
identify?
mean, everything is very reactive, right? I think ahead of time, it comes down to vetting processes, and nothing is going to be 100% bulletproof. It just, there's always going to be areas of gray because you are working with folks that do have a different objective. They're small business owners that want to just maintain and just keep their business alive. They're large industries that absolutely want to get out information to the masses. So it absolutely varies on like their objective. But even in the beginning, understanding, like I say, invest a lot into your compliance and deliverability teams. I think that's probably one of the biggest areas in any company, especially an ESP. That would be one of the biggest benefits to them. And look at vetting processes. Really get into the weeds with some of these folks that you want to bring on online onto your platform to really understand sort of their motivation initially, because that can be very telling. We're in a really strange time, I think, globally and economically, and I think at this point there could be a lot more sort of softening the edges, I guess you could say, bending the rules maybe a little bit. So if you're not paying attention and working closely with those internal teams and what their objectives are, you may be caught a little flat-footed and actually have someone get onto your platform and stuff. But a lot of this is unfortunately a reactive situation. You may see something that to you is just, oh, this is just this one bad sender that just sort of caused this one problem this one day. But we see things very, very differently. We see, like, trusted systems and trusted platforms all of a sudden sending out something that's spammy. It's malicious. It's it's causing a lot of problems on the other side. And so it's hard to know that it's just one client or it's just one thing. We just see an issue, and this issue has escalated to a point that we need to take action upon. And so monitoring all those folks at all time, even, like, I mean, there's a lot of, I think, internal tools that a lot of companies have that they can gauge sort of volume over time, and they can look at the spikes in any one of these metrics and at least sort of pause and maybe dig into a little bit more and stuff. And I see Julia's back on, so you
Yes,
might have a question.
because Lauren missed me, I chose to be back. I have two questions for you. Many of us rely on engagement like clicks to keep our lists clean. But if we're hitting spam traps that click on links to scan the email, are we accidentally keeping trap addresses on our lists because our metrics tell us they are active users? Oof.
So yes, I mean, like we before, I mean, in the early days, spam traps often were like they don't engage. So if you don't have somebody engaging, then it could be a spam trap. So, get rid of it. Well, that has definitely changed over time. And some of the reason of it is like I said, it's to really measure the quality of your data over time. And so there are traps that you will see, or you could see, actions being taken upon because you want it to mimic to some degree real users, because you don't want to just zero in and take out traps, because that doesn't solve the problem that you might be having. So look at all the other metrics as well. You have to look at everything as a whole in order to really understand sort of that engagement factor. And sometimes you will have a trap or two in your list. You're never going to get rid of them 100%. That's just by nature and how the industry has grown over
Perfect.
time. But
Thank
that,
you.
like I said, is not a bad thing. So
Perfect. So always keep the big picture.
yeah.
Another one for omni-channel marketers and brands. What suggestion? suggestions, sorry, would you have for the marketing department to invest more in email, which seems to bring more trust than digital advertising? Go, ladies.
I'm gonna let Lauren kind of run with
Yes,
this one. I feel like this is much more in her wheelhouse. So
go for email.
Yeah, yeah. So I think obviously engagement matters a ton in 2026. So I think one thing that's really helpful is just like if there's actions that you can get recipients to take that give you beyond just like opens and clicks. Like if you're actually getting them to reply, if you're getting them to, answer a quick question you had in a survey, something like that. Like if there's just ways that you can try to connect the dots. And I think also, pulling that, like I know it's painful. Sometimes you don't have like your conversion data in the same platform as your ESP data. But if you just even quarterly, even every 6 months, if you try to kind of correlate that information a little bit, I think that can actually be really helpful. I think the other, and so like you're trying to prove attribution, which is a complete pain in the butt, right? Like you're never going to fully get that. I think in some cases, what's helpful is having like a holdout group and being very diligent about keeping that holdout group very protected, right? So that way you can almost have like one where perhaps that group, my cat is just really excited about the email today. He's on my lap. So yeah, if you have that holdout group and basically you never email those folks, and then you have the bulk of your list that you are sending mail to, in some cases, you can almost make a case for the lifetime value of customers goes up when we're emailing them versus when we're not emailing them. So I think that's one thing. And then I think also just trying to even just make the case as a marketer for some of the kind of softer problems that you see when you're having email issues. And so figure like, it's hard to kind of measure what the cost is going to be, but if you can say, hey, like we're seeing less revenue from email, that's a problem, right? So when you see those dips, especially when it's like we're pushing this webinar, we're pushing this type of activity, that's going to be a problem. But also figure like if you're getting complaints at your support desk, right? If you're getting a flood of tickets, that can be expensive, not just because you have to staff up, but also like if you get a wave of it, you might have people that are having to be paid overtime, which is what, time and a half, right? So like it's just there's all of these like little kind of things that you can do to say, hey, like we're spending way too much money here. So I think you try to kind of bridge the gap between all the data points that you have. Like Melinda mentioned how important it is to kind of look at all those different data points. So just get creative. We all have different sets of data that we're looking at that we're able to kind of access. So,
And I have one last question, and then I would wrap it up in terms of questions and let you wrap your webinar off after that. What is the most effective way to explain the real cost of a block list to a marketing manager or CEO who only cares about send volume? That's a really tricky one. I'm going to leave you alone with that.
oh yeah, you're like, I'm out of
yeah.
here.
Done. um,
Yeah.
honestly, if you end up on a block list, and depending on the block list itself, it can have such an effect across the industry. Um, many block lists are being used by a ton of different mailbox providers, the folks that want to accept that you want mail to be accepted at. So if you do see something that is being blocked, I mean, that at the end of the day is impacting every one of your clients, and that's impacting their bottom line as well. They're not making the sales, they're not reaching the folks, they're not getting out the information that's important. And so the cost of just not being able to reach the folks that you want to reach is huge. And depending on how bad that block is and what has happened, that is not only on just this one area, but it can impact along globally, truly. And so the cost of that is far greater than just blasting out a bunch of emails that are never ever going to serve a purpose for you. I mean, be smart about it and really look at the folks that sort of want your email.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's like when, especially if you are hitting block lists, like figure this is the point when all of a sudden people start to care about email. So like you've got these like operational kind of fire drills happening internally, you pull off your IT person, you've got support and maybe customer success who are dealing with individual customers and trying to kind of talk them down out from an angry place and explain what happened. And then fix that one client's sending very quickly. Maybe you've got like leadership who's having to jump in, like you've got like almost like managers who are joining calls as well as the customer success person. So it's like there's all these like little steps and things that kind of don't get factored in So like, the leadership's like, just send more, right? But if you can kind of show them the impact that happens, right? Like that IT person perhaps is building that new feature that the sales is dying to be able to start selling. And so now they can't do that. They're distracted. These little things that really do kind of bubble up and make things just really expensive. Like I had a customer many, many years ago, very large brand that got listed on Spam House, and everybody was really upset. And they were like, we want you to join a call with us for 8 hours. They gave us like an 8 hour calendar invite and said, we're going to just sit on the call until we figure this out. And thankfully, not only my boss was involved, but also my boss's boss, right? The VP of our division, and was like, no, we're not doing that. Like, we will join, you can sit on the call. We will join the call when we have an update to share with you. And so I think, but it took that escalation process where now you've got not just one expert in the room, but you've got 3 people that are there having to kind of clean up that mess and figure if this is like a system-wide block that you're dealing with, not just one customer, that load of work is just exponential. So getting ahead of it, or just using that one instance of like, hey, we did that last time. We sent to the whole list and this is what happened, right? Like just remind them not just of the actual revenue, but all of the other little bits and pieces of cost.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Focus on the history. Otherwise you're bound to repeat it. Right.
For sure. Yep. Don't forget the history.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Then I think we're already almost at the end of the webinar. Unfortunately, I think you could talk for many, many more minutes as you
we could.
Hours, I don't know.
Yeah, look at the reactions in the chat. I think you can see them. So people have liked the talk, so did I. And yeah, I'm sure that you delivered the message that a block can be more cost intense than people assume, that reputation is hard to regain, that there are many people out there who can help. The email industry is a very healthy network community where people can help. And actually, I'm sharing the contact details from you guys now. So in case you guys want to get in touch with Melinda or Lauren, you can get it by email or via the contact form, which you can see now. And I would like to thank you guys for being such good fireside chat people, and for sharing your expertise, insights, and also your passion for the whole topic. We have been delighted to have you, and also many, many thanks for your preparation and your time for this. It has really been a pleasure. And to the audience, as said, you may get in touch with Spamhaus and Lauren directly. And I would like to thank you as well, because for your interest in CSA topics, or also especially this topic. And we will also post a blog article about the most relevant stuff of this webinar. So watch our LinkedIn for that. And remember that this webinar is being recorded, so you will also receive the recording after the webinar. Okay.
And really quick urge, we really do want you to reach out if you have questions. Like if there's things that we didn't tackle today that you still care about knowing, chances are there's other people that care about that same question. So I'd love to be able to answer that in whatever form makes sense.
That's a really cool sign. So there's really help out there. So, you cannot say there's no help. That there are people who know what they do and who are open for to help you. It cannot be better. Okay. Also, a short question I would like to ask the audience, if you have a little time, there will be a questionnaire at the end of the webinar, which will be popping up or also be sent by email. So in case you have more topics you would like to hear about, just write them in and we will try to find people who speak about them, and just put the topics here into the webinars which are of interest for you guys. Thank you all once again. Many, many thanks. Take care until the next webinar. Lauren, Melinda, thanks a lot. See you soon.
Thank you. All right. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.